Hello everyone, it's Jamarl Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. I hope everyone is doing alright. Let me check sound to make sure everything is up and running appropriately. While I check my sound, if you guys enjoy what I'm putting down, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you have not hit the notification bell already. I hear a lot of people saying that they have not been getting notifications. Sometimes when people leave comments at the bottom, the search algorithm apparently assists in doing this. So, and also you can always support the content through Patreon or, of course, Super Chats. Take a look at this. This was an interview between Jeremy Paxman and we're hopping across the pond, by the way, just as a heads up in case you haven't seen the title of the video. Let's hop across the pond. So I hope they don't dig me for this, but let's take a look at this.
David Cameron, do you know how many food banks there were in this country when you came to power?
I don't have the exact figures, but I know that usage of food banks has gone up. And there are many amazing volunteers who man those food banks and provide an important service.
There were 66 when you came to power. There are now 421.
Did you hear him? When David Cameron came to power, there were 66, and they had to expand to over 400. Now, that wasn't magic. That wasn't an act of God. That was an act of policy. That was the policy that his government has instituted. Let's keep going. I am making a point. I do have a point.
900,000 people took food parcels last year, free food parcels. You talked about broken Britain and fixing it. You haven't. It's more broken now than it was.
Well,
I'm putting that interview at the bottom just so you can see it. That question cut to the bone. I've seen Jeremy Corbyn get into one debate with David Cameron, going back, I think this was in 2016. And at the time, I had not seen anything cut to the nub in such a way, like literally cut straight to the bone. Your government was supposed to come in and fix Britain. You are supposed to be a steward of Britain. And we have expanded food banks because nearly 1 million people have not had the adequate resources to eat. Fast forward to Theresa May. Now, the interesting part is we've seen the Tory party just completely shambolic in the way that Jeremy Corbyn would say. Meaning the issues with the ambulance services where you had people dying in ambulances because they didn't put the resources into the NHS. That was a calamity, all again, called not by an act of God, by an act of policy. You have the immigration issue, again, and not an act of God, an act of policy. All of this under the Tory government. Stabbings in Britain where people were terrified of having their kids or or go out in London due to the stabbing crimes with the decrease in funding for the police forces. Tory party. Let's add something else to that. Take a look at this. Theresa May and the Tory government instituted what they call universal credit. This is Orwellian. It's not universal at all. Universal credit, this kind of utopian idea, essentially attacked the poor. Attack the poor. And part and parcel to those food banks, and part of the reason for those food banks, policy. So take a look at this. This was back in June of 2016 where they understood this. Let's flip. And here. It's official. Universal credit is a colossal, costly, hellish catastrophe. Now, universal credit was supposedly a complete revamping of Britain's, you could say, welfare system. Now, the catch here, though, is It was a failure. Not only was it it was a failure on two fronts. Let me flip back for the moment. It was a failure with regards to cost effectiveness, and it was a failure, more importantly, in getting supplies and resources to people who need those things. But again, this is the Tory party. It's like the Republican Party. Do you really trust conservatives with a welfare system? And if they're saying that they're going to revamp the welfare system, it's conservative party. Ultimately, they turned around and just used this as a means of attacking the poor. Not only is it more expensive, it doesn't do the job that they said. And this goes all the way back to June. Right here. The catastrophe of Ian Duncan Smith's universal credit is laid out on a mortuary slab by the National Audit Office, the public spending watchdog. A phenomenal cost to taxpayers, David Cameron and George Osborne backed this pointless upheaval that inflicted untold suffering on claimants and yet achieves nothing measurable, says the National Auditor's autopsy report. It is a breathtaking read. What I will put to you is that it accomplished exactly what it was supposed to accomplish. The Tory party wanted to make it difficult for people on the program because they wanted to try to force people into work, not caring that there were going to be many people who weren't able to get work or that their lives was going to be made remarkably much more difficult by the proceedings that they were pushing through. This is horrendous. This should mark a tombstone moment for the government whose wanton maladministration has caused unforced errors in one public sector after another. Think of the needless turmoil for the NHS. Again, people dying in hospital or dying in ambulances because they didn't put the necessary resources into the NHS. Immigration chaos, social care collapse. We're not even talking about the building that fell. Grenfell, the Grenfell Towers. Today, the Department of Work and Pensions is the offender. This is the new offender. This is an old article, but again, I have a point. The benefits that is set out to achieve through universal credit, such as increased employment and lower administration costs, are unlikely to be achieved. The department is castigated for the lack of regard and failing to understand the hardships faced by some claimants. You misunderstand the Tory party if that's what you think. It's not that they failed to misunderstand. It's that they didn't care. They didn't care. There's a difference in those things. Forget normal Whitehall tact here. Unfolds 8 years of unrelenting failure, plowing on despite alarms as the cost rose to $2 billion. Severe hardship is being caused because a quarter of the claimants are paid late, so people's debts and rents are in arrears soars. Districts where universal credit is rolled out see a 30% upsurge in food bank use. Some 60% of the claimants need an advance before payments come through, which becomes added debt. Some councils and social landlords are out of pocket for rent unpaid, and private landlords refuse to let those on universal credit. The system will never deliver all claims on time. It's more expensive and it's hurting the British public. Both. This was back in 2018 in June. They knew this in June. Fast forward. Universal credit is a wonderland reform divorced from real lives. This was 3 hours ago. Again, I have a point. The government has landed us with a benefit that is all too costly to roll out, but also too costly to scrap. Let me read the first part. Essentially, the same thing now as was then. Not only is it expensive, it is not delivering on what its stated objectives were, but what I would argue is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, meaning make life difficult for the people that are owing it. They want to attack the poor. Tories are just Republicans. They just haven't been able to come into their own yet. They haven't had the public that would allow them to come into their own. Given the opportunity, they would be just as rapacious and just as knuckle-dragging as the Republicans here. Never forget that. The rollout of universal credit is the latest attempt made by quote-unquote reformers to balance out four competing objectives in the British welfare system. These goals have bedeviled successive post-war governments, providing an adequate minimum income to the poor, incentivizing them to get a job and climb out of pay ladder, simplifying the administration of benefits, and limiting the size of the bill for the taxpayers. How successful has the latest generation of reformers been in meeting those objectives? Not very. Evidence gathered from the Commons Work and Pension Select Committee, as well as Feeding Birkenhead, a program I set up 4 years ago to counter hunger and destitution in the town, suggests that the design and the delivery of the universal credit, the government's radical overhaul of the benefits system, are divorcing it from reality of how millions of people on low income live, work, and budget. As a result, a barrage of financial risk is being offloaded on the shoulders of the poorer people. All too many are being pushed deeper into poverty, and in the case of some particularly vulnerable women, into sex work. The government has landed us with a benefit that is all too costly to roll out, but also too costly to scrap. That's the universal credit system of the Tories, attacking the poor. Fast forward. Tory MPs blocked the public from seeing universal credit impact papers. We can't let the public see how much of a failure this is. We can't let them see how many people this is hurting as they roll this process out. The Tory party, just like the Republican Party, hates the poor, and the policies that they enact attacks the poor. It's true here in the United States. And then this radical overhaul of the system, going back since the beginning of the rollout, it was an utter failure. And in this case, they're trying to prevent the public from seeing how much of a failure. Tory MPs blocked public from seeing universal credit's impact paper. Esther McVey has admitted some of the people are worse off. That's an understatement. That's a magnificent understatement. Tory MPs have blocked an attempt to obtain government analysis of the impact of universal credit on people's incomes. MPs voted 299 to 279 against an attempt by Labour to secure the release of an assessment drawn up by officials, a majority of 20. The move followed a report that Work and Pension Secretary Esther McVey warned Cabinet that some claimants could be $200 a month worse off under the new benefit system. Understand what that means. Put that in real terms. What does it mean to be 200 pounds worse off, especially when you're living at the margins? Now, as somebody who's lived at the margins, yeah, that's fair to say, lived at the margins at times in my life, especially when I was 17, diagnosed with kidney failure and everything else. I've said that before. But you need to understand what that means. That means this idea of getting work and getting a job gets pushed to the back burner, which means that you're forced into this kind of poverty, not for anything that you've done, not for anything that you've wanted to do, but just because of who you are. 200 pounds a month is a significant chunk of money to not have if you are already at the bottom of the income distribution. It's cavalier to put that in writing, and it's easy to read, but I swear to God, it is a difficult thing to have to endure if you're one of those people who are at the margins, 200 pounds poorer because of a policy that was unnecessary to implement and that the government implemented anyway. Universal credit. That's amazing. Let's keep going. Last week, she admitted during an interview that some people will be worse off on universal credit than under the previous system. Shadow Work and Pension Secretary Margaret Greenwood told the Commons today that the UC, Universal Credit, had been beset with flaws in its design and delivery and was causing immense hardship. She said that 3.2 million families with children could lose around 50 pounds a week, adding, people are worried, but there's no clarity from the government. Again, the point of the program was not to work. Yes, they probably would have preferred it to work. But the goal of the program was to push people out of the system by making their lives miserable. That's the goal. That's the goal. Let's be clear on what we're talking about. McVeigh has insisted that the government had taken a mature approach to the rollout system. McVeigh insisted the rollout of universal credit would continue because she said she would ensure the government gets it right. I guess you have to take her word for it. We will make sure we get the benefits right. You know why? Because the genuine concern of the people on our backbenches want to get it right, she told MPs. God, she's cynical. God, she's cynical. It came as the government revealed it's facing the benefits bill of more than $1.5 billion after underpaying tens of thousands of disabled claimants, people who are already the poorest of the society, getting shafted because the Tories wanted to have a radical overhaul of a system that didn't need a radical overhaul. An estimated 180,000 people are due arrear payment totaling $970 million after under-receiving employment and support allowance, Department for Work and Pensions papers have shown. The poorest people in your society are being shafted by the government. They're already at the margins, and they're being pushed further into poverty. And the cost of paying them extra after their claims have been corrected is estimated to be another $700 million over the next 7 years, taking the total additional bill to £1.67 billion. An internal analysis revealed on Wednesday shows. Not only are they hurting people, not only are they making people's lives more miserable, but the program is not even doing what it says it's supposed to do, which is control costs. Amazing. That's a Tory government for you. But Theresa May is dancing. Dancing, dancing, dancing. Theresa May is a dancing machine. You can stop living at the margins if you quit letting progressive voice take your shit from you. Oh, God. People are scrambling to come up with a solution for the problems universal health credits cause. Guess what the next proposal will be? Increase private industry, yes. Involvement in relief programs, yes. The wild part about this is, though, if you look at the number of food banks, they've scaled upwards. They are hurting people. They are absolutely hurting people, human beings. They're hurting human beings. Tories thought they were playing 3D checkers when they clearly didn't have a clue. Oh, that's funny, Baltazar. See, I'm more cynical than I think you guys are. The program was designed to hurt. That's what I believe. The program was designed to hurt. The goal was to try to force people that were in the margins into work, which means that right off the bat, there's going to be a percentage of people who can't work and who will get forced further into poverty. The Tories didn't care, just like they didn't care when they attacked the NHS or when they attacked the police force or other public services. The Tories don't care. I'll end it here. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the Patreon. It's another example of the crippling public, what was that? Crippling public programs in order to open way for private interests. Yes. Yeah. It was, yeah. I agree, JT. It was designed to cut costs and put on cash at the top. Tories look at Republicans and masturbate to them. Honestly, real talk. The Tories that are in Britain look at what the Republican Party is in the United States and can only lust after what the Republican Party is. In part because the Democratic Party has moved so far to the right that the Republican Party has gone off a fucking cliff. And the Tories look at that and be like, oh, if we could just be them, if we could just fuck people over in the way that you guys are fucking people over in the United States. God, how can we be that way? How can we be that way? When I do stories like this, I try to get across to Brits use us as an example of what not to be. Just saying. Just saying. Part of the Brexit thing, real talk, Boris Johnson, part of the reason that Boris Johnson is such a wet dream for Brexit is because they want to cut the regulations to the bone. I mean, ultimately, they hate this idea of the European Union and the policy, and these progressive policies that the European Union has. No, not all of the policies, but some of them, many of them are. And many of them, Britain, especially people like Boris Johnson, finds as a restraint. Theresa May has already talked about cutting taxes, but part of this is also cutting regulation. Tories are just Republicans. They just haven't gotten to the point where they can be full Republicans yet. If you let them, they would get there. So I'll leave it here. As long as it's not R. Kelly level of real talk. No, it's not that level. It's not that level. It's not that level of real talk. Obama admin played the game the best. I think May wanted to be the white lady Obama. So I always say that too, that the Tory party is essentially the Democratic Party in the United States. Yeah, for the most, yes. From a policy-wise. But given the opportunity, man, they would run for the hills. They would run for the hills. And run for the hills, I mean, they would cut regulation to the bone, cut taxes to the bone, cut public utilities, privatize. Yes. I feel bad about watching Boris Johnson on Have I Got News for You and thinking he seems real nice. He played the part too well. You would just say he played the part too well. He's affable, and because he's affable, he comes across as in a particular way. Affability is different than policy. You can be as affable as you want to be. What are you going to do when you get in that office? That's what I care about. That's what I care about. Has R. Kelly stopped pissing in the face of little girls? Why isn't he in jail? I don't know if he stopped peeing on women. The pee thing is funny to me. Just bizarre. I know somebody said one day, they said, if you were in a party, they were talking about R. Kelly, they said you could be in a party of 100 people, and they said there would be one 15-year-old, and R. Kelly would find a 15-year-old. I don't know how much truth there is to that, but that always stuck with me. All right, guys, I'm going to end this here. I don't know what's going on with the channel, but we haven't been able to get a large crowd. But nevertheless, I hope you guys are good, and if you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you guys can always support the Patreon. Thanks all. It's literally called 12 Nights of Christmas. You're talking about R. Kelly. I bet you're talking about R. Kelly. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. You got that album, don't you? R. Kelly, 12 Nights of Christmas. She's lying. She should be singing it. All right, guys.